Okay, I think I'm ready here. So, hello. Oh, I guess I already have my mic on the whole time. Well, hello and welcome to a live stream. I am very small today because I'm doing something a little different with my setup here because I wanted to show you several things on this stream and it is easier if I'm smaller. So, yeah, sorry for that surprise. So, welcome to a live stream. This is DGST 101, a live stream for the DGST 101 Intro to Digital Studies, a class at the University of Mary Washington. I am the professor. So this is what we're doing. Today is week. It is, what is today? Today's not Wednesday, is it? It is. Today's Wednesday. So today is Wednesday of week 4, and we have a project this week that it requires doing some things for the web. So I just realized that I was not actually even playing the audio through Twitch either. Man, I was trying to set up some things and I was not paying attention to everything. Let's see. Oh wait, I actually have 2 Twitch windows open too. Hang on, I'm all discombobulated today because I had a sort of challenging morning. Not challenging, but the problem this morning that led to me not being able to post anything until a little bit later was that I went to campus to do some work and I forgot my laptop charger, so I was kind of stranded without my computer, and I was able to do some other kinds of work, but not anything related to class. So that's why I'm a little bit rushed today, but I have some things that I think will be helpful as you are preparing to move forward with your digital methodology projects. So the actual methodological part, the research part, I've been seeing you all posting and discussing a few ideas in Discord, but keep that going. I think once you have a specific idea, it's a lot easier to help you. So as soon as you have an idea for your project, not just like what kind of thing are you going to do, but like what is your research question or hypothesis, then I probably can be pretty helpful. I mean, I try to be. So let me know, or just post it in your Discord channels, and I will see those and try to interact. I did have a comment/question for the digital journalism group, because that's a particularly challenging one for this semester, but it's a really exciting one if you can do it well, but it can be a bit of a different kind of challenge. In that case, it's not so much mastering a specific tool, but finding a story to tell. I mean, journalism or reporting is really just good storytelling in a way. So you got to find a story to tell, and you don't have time to research and investigate your own story. So what are you going to do if you're doing data journalism? I would really kind of think of it, I just said data journalism, but it's actually called digital journalism, but my recommendation would be to approach it more like data journalism, which is to say find some interesting data and find the story in that data and tell that story with your webpage. I mentioned a couple, data.virginia.gov is an open data portal, and there's a lot in here. I haven't used it that much, but I've just explored it, and it's pretty interesting what they make available. So I don't know what's in here. Let's click on transportation. Scooters. Okay. So neat. All right. So this is the kind of thing you can produce with this portal, like this interactive graphic. That's the kind of thing you can make. So that's what I was going to say would be an interesting example of data journalism. In fact, this article I'm viewing here looks like a pretty good example of what you might do. So just a thought. And this is Norfolk specific, so that's, I guess, where they're getting their data from. So just an idea. All right, so whatever you're doing, let me know. But what you all are doing is you're going to be working on your web pages, and so I am going to spend some time today talking about doing the web stuff. Yesterday I spent like an hour and a half playing with some of the visual data from episodes of Loki. I have continued doing some of that. I grabbed episode 4 and did the same thing with it, and I can do episodes 5 and 6, whenever. But what I'm going to try to do today is build a web page using that data. So I'm going to kind of start from scratch and take you through the whole process of working with HTML on your domain. And I have a really ambitious goal today, and I don't know if I'll get there, but I've never done this before, but I'm going to try to teach you, or at least explain as I do it, several steps that will, I think, result in a pretty good looking web page using a CSS framework. And I use frameworks myself, but I don't usually teach it because of the layers of abstraction that you have to get through in order to work with it. But I'm hoping that I can kind of gloss over that and then just give you something that'll work, and you can work with it and kind of deal with the abstract parts of it, as they come up or later. But I think, I want to try it. We'll see how it goes, but I hope it's helpful. So I've got my screen set up a special way, as you can see. Hopefully you can see. It's very small on my preview here, so let me just put a little bit of gap between these two. These are two separate windows, and I like working this way because I can put code on the left and then you can see the result on the right. That's how I like to work myself, and also I think it makes sense to present it this way. I guess I could move myself over to the middle. No, I don't want to do that. But that's, does it update live when I do that? I guess it does. Anyway, this is, I'll stay over here in the corner. And I'm going to open a text editor. Let's slide it over just a little bit more. Where I can edit the code, and then I'm going to show you the results on the right. And you'll be able to see the URLs here, and actually I'll share the URL of the page I'm working on in Twitch and Discord, just in case you want to actually literally watch me do it. Like, you can refresh it, check it in your own browser, and see what I do. Okay, so let's get started. So this is my UMW domains page. I'm going to do code on the left, so I'm going to get that going over here. And I'll show you a couple of things. I thought it might be helpful maybe to also explain a few things about the domains dashboard and the control panel. Sometimes you'll notice that some of the layout is going to look a little different, by the way, just because I have the narrow window here, but it's still the same thing. So, all right, let me switch over to my other cPanel accounts and open the file manager. So I already introduced the file manager on Monday, and it might help for me to do a little bit more introduction actually. So this is it. This is the file manager, and there's a lot of information here. So let me explain some of this information because you might find yourself needing it. I think Kate was asking about help, asking some questions along those lines. So Kate, I hope you're able to figure that out. It sounded like you did, but I didn't fully understand what you did. So I hope something worked. Anyway, just big picture, File Manager is a way to access the files and folders on the web server. And the web server is a computer just like the one that you're using to watch this or to work on anything else. So this is a special kind of computer that's meant to serve web pages, like to provide a web page whenever someone accesses it through a web browser. And there's a lot of stuff here that you don't ever need to deal with. If you look down on the left, this is kind of like a top level view of all the folders in my account. Mine looks more chaotic than yours because I have a lot of subdomains and little projects and things. I wish I could make this a smaller one, but I think I wish I could sort of start over with a new, fresh account that looks more like yours. But like if you kind of look down it, you'll notice that there are some patterns in these names. Many of them look like subdomains because they are. So applied.dgst101.net, archive.dgst101.net, arc.dgst101.net. Comics.marywashacomics.net. I have multiple domains here, so that's why you see multiple domains and then also multiple subdomains. So those are all places where you can access the content of a subdomain. So a quick fake temporary subdomain, that was the one I created to demonstrate how to install WordPress. So I'm going to click on this and show you that nothing is in it. Did I already? This one? I do this kind of thing all the time to make, so maybe it's this one. Yeah, I guess it's this one because what I'm seeing here is no, this was last summer's fake subdomain. Anyway, it's around here somewhere, and the point is just that I think this is the one I made. Anyway, the point is that WordPress, we think of it as a single thing, like a tool. You might think of it as a single thing or a tool. You log into it, you post your stuff on it. But it is actually quite a few separate files and scripts working together to create that application. And all those files are here. You can look at them in the file manager. I don't recommend editing them or doing anything with them really, but you can. Like if you think there's some problem in their code, you can just go in here and fix it. I again don't recommend doing that, but like this is PHP code. This is what it looks like. PHP is the main. It's a server side scripting language. So that's that's the file manager. So if you're trying to figure out where something is on the web, you can figure it out in a couple ways. When I say on the web, I mean something you can access like through a web browser, right? If it's a subdomain, if you see it over here with this kind of name structure, demo subdomain, in my case, or in your case, maybe it's practice.yourname.com or dgst101.yourname.com or whatever it is. That's going to be the easiest way to find something. So you just literally, like, this is the name of the folder, and So that's also the URL. I can figure out the URL from that. I just have to put HTTP in front of it over here, and then it's practice.dgst101.net. There you go. So that's how we've set it up on our UMW domain server. I don't want to get technical, but there are other ways you could map subdomains to directories, but they've done it this way because I think it's pretty intuitive to find your file. So that's how you find it if it's in a subdomain. There are a couple other locations worth noticing, though. There's a folder there called subdomains, but you won't have that. That's an old-fashioned way of doing it. So this one here named public_HTML, that is a really important folder. Don't change that folder, don't delete it. Certainly don't delete it. But if you have content on your main page, so if you have a WordPress installed at yourname.com, if you click on and view the contents of public HTML, that's where you will see your WordPress files. And that's it's the same thing I just showed you in the subdomain, but in that case, it's on the homepage part of that. So public_HTML is a specially named folder that means these are the things that we're putting on the web. It's public and it's HTML because this is the web, and so that's what we're doing here. So if this would also be the case if you installed WordPress in a subdirectory. So if it's yourname.com/blog, and that's where WordPress lives, then you would see it in a subdirectory here. You'd be able to click on it and go over here to see that blog kind of thing. Okay, so that's navigating here. I have a few more things to show you, but I'll just, as I always say, if you have questions, please put them in either of the chat places, and I'll try to get to those. So I am going to at least hope that makes sense and you can find your files. If you can't, then please ask and I can try to help. But if you ask, let me know where you think it is. So where have you looked already, so I can maybe guide you in the right direction. So practice is here, and I'm going to make a brand new page so I can show you some things, but this is it. I've got this view kind of narrow right now, so hopefully you can see it okay. I wonder if I can make this, no, I was hoping I could make the sidebar narrower, but I can't. So I just wanted to kind of scroll over and show you a couple of things. This is all you can see about these files. Now I'm going to right click on this. I don't know if you'll be able to see the pop-up. Yeah, it looks like you can. So there are some options here. There is an option called HTML edit. I'm not going to be using that, and I don't recommend you use it either, but if you end up using it, it's not the end of the world. This is, if you click edit instead, this will take you to just a plain text code editor. And a plain text code editor is an important thing that you have to use to write HTML. You cannot write HTML in a document editor. I'm going to say this again because it always happens where someone tries it and then they don't understand why it doesn't work. But I'm telling you now, you cannot use Microsoft Word to write HTML code. You cannot use Google Docs to write HTML code. Pages, anything like that. Because those are meant to write documents, prose, essays, poetry, letters. That's what those are for. And there are little typographic things that are going on when you write that document that you probably don't realize or notice, but they are above and beyond what's considered plain text. So things like curly quotes, right? So when you write dialogue and you write quotes and they go like that, those are actually special characters that work fine and intuitively in a document when you're writing prose or an essay or something, you want to quote somebody. But those are different characters than this one that I just typed. And so in a code context, the different systems that have to parse and understand this, they won't see that as the same thing as a curly quote. And you can have problems related to that. But when you're using a code editor like this, you can't even type that character. It doesn't, there's no way to put that curly quote in there. So I really recommend writing in this kind of editor. Some people, they think, oh, I'll write it over here in Word, my Word doc, and then I'll copy and paste it into the code editor later. Don't do that, because that will cause that problem that I told you about. So there you go. Don't do that. So let's get started. This is just the basic HTML skeleton. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on individual tags and structure kind of stuff, because I'm hoping that you're getting that from Codecademy or W3 Schools, or a couple of people mentioned, shared a few videos I think that are pretty good, and I saw someone posted a nice cheat sheet, which is great. So those are I'm hoping that kind of stuff is good. I mean, once you kind of get what HTML is, a lot of the work you do is just kind of finding what tag do you need, and then you look up the tag, and then you see how to use it, and then you just use it. I just noticed I wrote that backwards. I capitalized it backwards. Doesn't matter. Okay, so that's better. Yeah, conventionally tags are always written in lowercase, and Interestingly though, that was not always the case. If you look at web pages that were coded in the 90s, all of the source code, like all the tags, are uppercase. And then sometime around the year 2000, we started doing it differently. And it's not important, so I won't explain why. It doesn't matter. This is our web page, and I'm going to give it a title. I'm going to actually sort of build a sample project, kind of like you might be working on, using my Loki stuff that I was working on yesterday as the examples here. So I need to come up with a title for this essay. I'll just call it, something generic. So investigating color patterns in Loki. Right. So that is that. I am using this document, by the way, called, what is this called? Did I make a new file? No, it's this document called project.html. So I will save the changes and I will take a look at project.html here. And what I like to do is sort of do one thing at a time and then see if it made the difference that I expected it to. And if it did, then great. If not, then I try to figure out why. But working in little steps like that really helps when you're doing code, because then you can isolate a problem more quickly as it happens. So the narrow view here, I needed to kind of expand that. I wonder if I can can I set this to wrap lines? Because that would be helpful. What does this button do? Oh, it just does wrapping. Okay. But it's not wrapping. Why not? Oh, because it's, okay. It's not, it doesn't care that I'm zoomed in. It's just waiting for, can I make this? I wish I could make that bigger than 24 pixels so that it would wrap more accurately. And when I say wrap, it would just, like, one line, instead of going off the window, it would wrap around to the next line below it visually. That's why the line numbers are here, by the way, because when you have a line that wraps, you want to be able to see that it's still the same line. And so what'll happen if this did wrap correctly would be that it would show a gap between lines 4 and 5, where the rest of that line 4 continues. I don't know. Anyway, so it's hopefully that's, I don't know, is that visible enough? Let me see what it looks like on the preview here. I'm gonna go with it. I mean, I think I'm gonna need it to be a decent size like that in order for me to see it. So that's all that's to say, like, everything looks fine so far, which is I've given it a title, but because this title tag is inside of the head, and hopefully or I can tell you now that things that go in the head, it's information about the document. It's not the document itself. It's not what you see on the web page. And so in a browser like Chrome puts that in this tab up here at the top. So it is there. The title tag is working, but you can't see it. It's telling the browser information about the web page. We want to tell the reader about it too, so let's give it a title. Let's go with H1 for this, and the same thing. Write the same title. In fact, don't need that there. I'll do that. And okay, there we go. So, whoops. Oh yeah, I keep hitting Control S to save, but it doesn't. You gotta actually click the button. That is the bait and drag for me. That's the most annoying part about this. Okay, so investigating color patterns in Loki. Great. So let's add some text. Now I'm not going to actually write an essay right now. I'm going to go ahead and get some dummy text. Lipsum.com is a good place to get this. The standard printer's copy. This is some Latin text, and you don't have to know what it means, but it's and that's the point, is that it looks like writing, and so you can kind of try it out in different layouts without having to actually have a document. So all right, so I'm going to do a couple things to this. I'm going to paste it in here. I just did Control V, and now you can see the line wrapping working, by the way. So this is all line 9, this is all line 11, and so on. Okay, so I'm going to do things iteratively, kind of step by step, but I am moving quickly, but I'm going to leave the code in the, leave it here. So hopefully if you see something that doesn't make sense, you can ask me to pause, or you can, pause the video if you're watching this later. So I'm going to kind of run through a few pretty important concepts. I keep doing that. I keep hitting Control S. Save changes. Refresh here. There we go. So you can see all the text here, but one thing you'll notice is that it's not broken up into paragraphs. It's just one big giant block. And that's because HTML does not care about white space. So when I write it here, if I put a bunch of lines here, if I put a bunch of lines here, let's say, a whole bunch of lines, or let's say I put like a bunch of spaces here. Spaces and returns are basically collapsed into zero space in HTML. And that's so you can write it in a way that is easy to read for yourself and not have to worry about how it's going to look until later. But there are ways we can indicate that actually these are separate paragraphs. We want them to appear separate visually. and those are two separate features of these paragraphs, actually. What it is semantically is a paragraph. What it is visually is a block of text separated from some other block of text. So let's add some tags. The tag that goes around a paragraph is the lowercase letter p. So that's the opening one there, the opening p, and then the closing one. And this is going to be a little bit annoying for me to have to scroll horizontally like this. Notice as I type, by the way, that different things are color-coded as I go, and that's really helpful when you work in a code editor like this. A code editor with syntax highlighting will alert you when you've done something wrong, for one thing. So we want our text to be black. We want the tags to be purple. Attributes are going to be, I think it's gold, but we'll get to those later, hopefully. So I'm just going through the process here writing these paragraphs. All right, so that's going to make a difference. Hey, there we go. That looks pretty good. No weird looking characters yet. That's good. Let me go ahead and show you a little trick that a lot of people run into, and I'll show you a trick for getting around it. So like you might find it more convenient to post, write your content in a document first, like write your actual prose, your essay, in something like Google Docs, and that's a good idea. Do you know this shortcut, by the way? This is pretty useful if you're in a hurry and you need to make a new Google Doc. You don't have to go to Google and then click create a new document. You can just go to the address bar of your web browser, whatever browser you're using, and you can type docs.new in EW, and it'll just make a new Google Doc, just like that. It also works for slides, and so it's slides.new, or spreadsheets, so it's sheets.new, and it just quickly makes a new thing. So, okay, so here's, we'll just do, what is it? Color patterns. Okay. So as you're writing, hello. So as you're writing, you will probably use quotes, and I'm making up some text here just to demonstrate something that you'll see shortly. And then, so here's some. I'll grab this lorem ipsum text here, but let's say some of this is actually a quotation. So I'll do a quote mark there, and end quotes there, and I'll do like Loki's I don't know, something with an apostrophe. Loki's powers don't work in the VBA. I don't know. Just the point was there just to show you that I'm writing with some apostrophes, and you can see that that's not the straight up and down tick. Like if I type it over here in the text editor, you'll see it looks less like just a single straight up and down thing, but if I type it over here in Google Docs, you'll see it's curly. Those are actually separate characters, separate letters, essentially, in terms of how a computer thinks of things. They track them with different numbers. So one thing that can happen is, let's say you write your stuff over here, it looks good, you like how everything's going, but it has these extra characters in it. Let's copy and paste it and see what's going to happen here. I'm trying to recreate a bug, so hopefully I do, and I can show you how to fix it. All right, so, yeah, there we go. And so you can see the curly quote is still here. I was able to copy and paste it here, but it might cause a problem when we try to review it on the web page. So let's take a look. Yep, it did. Good. So I say it's good because it caused a problem that I believe I know how to fix. And this is very common, so I'm hoping that this is, by explaining it now, I can help some people avoid it. Okay, so two ways you can fix, well, probably more, but two ways you can fix it is, one way is just to simply change these to, the right character. So just like, type it in the code editor and you can do that. But that's a lot of finding and replacing. It really is kind of hard to see because it's these tiny little characters. So there's another way you can do it as well, and I'm going to have to actually check. Actually, I'll check this cheat sheet to see if it's on there because those are helpful. Where was that? Shared in Discord. And I consult cheat sheets all the time. Where was it? I can't find it now. Okay, no, I don't see it now. Did somebody delete it? I hope not, because that was useful. Cheat sheets are great. Well, there is a tag I need, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, so I'm trying to remember how to do meta tag UTF encoding. I think it's lang equals but I need to just check. So yeah, here's how you do it, right? Google it, there it is. There it is, that's what I was looking for. Char set, that's what I was using, that's what I needed. So this is a meta tag, and as you can see in this example, the meta tag goes inside of a head tag, which I do already have, so I don't need to copy this head because I already have a head. I just need to copy this line here, the meta part that I need. And I'm going to put that inside of the head. I'll put it just after the head opens, and there we go. I like to do my tags like that, just an old habit. So let's try, and yeah, it worked. So now we're back to, we're seeing actual quote marks and apostrophes because the slightly technical explanation, but by default HTML just knows ASCII characters, so that's the norm, that's like characters up to the numeric equivalent of 127. So that's all the letters and numbers and some basic punctuation. But these curly quotes, they're special characters, so they're up in, the computer has to address those with much higher numbers than what's covered in the ASCII number set. So UTF-8 covers that much larger range of potential characters. Also includes like emoji and stuff. So that would be another way to do that. I mean, doing UTF-8 should also allow you to post emoji. Excuse me. Okay, so I like that color. I mean, I like that curly quote, so I'm going to bring it back. No, not there. I can't type in the browser. Hey, there we go. Okay. Looking good. Now, I've got some stuff here, and it's looking okay. P tags, these are block elements. There's some other block elements that might be useful. If you have a document this long, I do recommend using subheadings. So a subheading in this case would be an H2, and let's do another H2 down here. You notice I'm repeating the H2. It's not the numbers after the H don't go in order down the page. They indicate the order of priority, and so it has to do with like an outline level. So these H2s are all at the same level as each other. So we'll do introduction, we'll do data, and then we'll do analysis. All right, so let me save that. And there we go. So now my document looks like it has some structure. This is still dummy text, but it I think is already a lot easier to parse. Okay, so far I've just been using HTML, and HTML is great, as you can see, for content and for structure, and it looks pretty good. Oh yeah, I forgot to share the URL, by the way, in case anyone cares to take a look at it yourself as it develops. Here we go. So here's, I'll do it here. I want to see Captain, you do have some questions. Hang on a second. Here's the, okay, so so Captain with no questions, I don't know how, yeah, I can answer that question. Yes, I will answer that question. So give me a second, I'll get to it. You're asking about putting images on your web page, and you've talked about, you've asked about getting an embed link from Imgur. And I don't know how Imgur does those, but I'll show you a better way to do it if you'd like. And then if you still want to go with the Imgur way, I'll see if I can figure that out too. In fact, let's see. I was about to transition into CSS, but I think actually talking about images now would make a bit more sense too, because we're sticking with HTML land. Okay, so let's do it. So I'm going to need to go back to the file manager. I'm going to keep this tab open on the HTML code, and I'm going to do some things here. As you know, an image is a file on the computer. It's a JPEG file, a GIF file, a PNG file. It's a document. It's a thing, right? And so whenever you see a image inside of a web page, that is a separate file than the web page that you're seeing. So the web page that I'm building right now is project.html, but if I want to put images in there, those image files also have to be included, and they have to need to show up inside of the HTML. So I need to write a tag to do that. Within HTML, everything is tags. So I would add an image tag and then load it from there. So image tags look like this. They don't have an opening and a closing part. Like you don't do it with two separate things. Like, can't type like this. This is not how you do an image tag. Instead, it actually just is self-closing, and then you add several what are called attributes to explain to the web browser where this image is and how big it should be and a few other important things. So those attributes all are structured like this. It's the name of the attribute followed by an equal sign followed by some quote marks, and then that's where you're going to specify the value that you're assigning to that attribute. So source is the location of the image that you want to load on your web page, and then you can also do width and then height, and those are just numbers. And then you should also always add an alt as well. There's a couple more, but these are the ones that are really required. So source is really, I guess, the most important because that's going to tell your web browser where do I find this image to load it here. And what it is expecting is a URL. URL, if you recall from way back beginning of this class, a URL stands for a uniform resource locator. I blanked out for a second there. And that just means it's a uniform pattern for locating a resource. And in an image tag, the resource we're trying to locate is a JPEG file. So we need to know where the file is that we want to work with. And the easiest way to know where it is to upload it yourself. So I'm going to upload an image here, and I'm going back to the file manager. Notice how I'm still in the same folder that I am right now. So project.html, and then I'm going to click plus file. No, is it plus file? No, it's upload. Yeah, I'm going to click upload, which is kind of hard to find and might be kind of hard to see on your view, but it's right at the top middle. And then I click upload. I'm going to select a file to upload. I'm going to get one of my Loki files. I'll do, I'll just do the, you know what, I liked the barcode from episode 3. I'm going to get the barcode from episode 3. And it's a pretty big file, it's 1.2 megabytes, but it'll work okay for now. I would probably actually shrink that in an image editor like Photoshop first before uploading an image that big. I know 1 megabyte doesn't seem like a big image, but it is. So I've got it uploaded here. It's in the same folder as my HTML file, but I haven't put it anywhere yet. I can't see it yet because it's has not actually been loaded by my image tag yet. Now that happens here in the source area, and I'm going to give this a little bit more room so you can see what I'm doing a bit more clearly. Hopefully that's okay. Can you see that okay? Yeah, so the source attribute, again, is the location of this file. And because this file that I'm editing right now, which is it's project.html, is in the same folder as this file right here, which is barcode raw.png, when I say the source, when I specify the location, all I need is the file name, because the web page will automatically look in its immediate neighborhood first, and that neighborhood being the folder that it's in, and then if it finds that file, it will load it, and we're good to go. So I'm going to hit save and see if that happened. Hey, there it is. It's yeah, it's very, very large, as you can see, but that's all right. That's it loaded. It appears. So that's the way that I would do it. I'm not done yet with my image tag, but that's the method. This is the method I would really recommend you do, especially if you have your own images, your own screenshots, or whatever you're working on. So let me just do a couple of quick things here. So the width here is a number, so it's going to be a number of pixels wide that you want it to be, and so is the height. And you want to make sure you preserve the aspect ratio, or else you'll get it squished or whatever. You can set these numbers to any number, and it'll make them that number. So let's say if I make it, the width is 200 and the height is 2000 or 1000, and yeah, it still looks kind of interesting, but it's not the image that I originally wanted this to be. And of course, if you were doing this and you had an image of a person, for example, and it ended up squished like this would look pretty strange. I mean, with this abstract image, like, I kind of like that. That actually looks better in a way. So, it's not terrible, but in your case, you would probably find that to be true, that you wouldn't necessarily want to, you wouldn't want it to be compressed that way. All right, so that's, so I'd have to actually look at this image to figure out what its dimensions, what it expects the dimensions to be. I suppose I could do that. So I can calculate the right width and height. So this was episode 3, right? All right, so I'm just opening, you can't see this, but I'm opening it up on my computer so I can see that it is 1231 by 527. So yeah, I can't really do that's. I'm gonna have to get a calculator to do that math, and I'm not gonna bother. I'm actually just gonna let it let it decide how wide that's going to be. And actually, this will create a problem with my layout, but if I can get far enough into this demo today to show you how to use a CSS framework, that CSS framework will actually solve the layout problem for me. But I'm going to leave it just the way it is for now. So the alt attribute, this is also really important. This is what happens and what you will see if the image fails to load, or if the person accessing your web page, or if you are accessing your web page and you can't see it. Users that are blind will have software that reads a description of the web page to them, and if it's text, it'll just read the text. But that software cannot read and explain an image, so you have to provide that explanation here in the alt attribute. So this is abstract barcode created from episode 3, showing a row of thin vertical lines. So you notice I'm describing the image. This is not the same thing as a caption. It's the thing that is here. Oh, and caption says it worked. So you already did what I was showing you and it works. Great. Yeah, so I won't bother showing you the image approach, because if you did it this way and it worked, then that's better. Okay, so that's an image, and that's going to be okay. Now you're probably looking at this web page and thinking, okay, it looks pretty boring. We just got Times New Roman, black text on a white background, and it is pretty boring. So what we want to do instead is we want to change some colors, change some things around to make it look different, make it look better. I can see by the time right now that I'm probably not going to be done by 2, because I really want to try to get into a CSS framework. So maybe 20 more minutes. We'll see. probably more. Knowing how I tend to do things. So we need to talk about CSS. So far all I've been writing is in the language called HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. There is another language called CSS, which stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and CSS is a language where you decide and you define how you want your HTML to look. It's a separation of content, which is the HTML, from presentation, which is CSS. And so that's something that it requires a little bit of abstraction. Like, you have to kind of think a bit abstractly about what you're doing, because the CSS syntax is very, very different from HTML syntax, but it is built on the same logic. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it actually links, they're actually built together in a really elegant way, I think. So to create some styles, or to start writing some CSS code, you should, there's actually 3 ways to do it, but I'm going to do it this way because I like it, which is I'm going to put this into a style tag inside of the head of my HTML document, and this marks out a special area in my web page where I can write CSS. So it's this style tag. I've got it opening on line 6, closing on line 9, and it just gives me room to work here where I can write my CSS. Now, CSS, I hope you've been introduced to CSS if you've been working through W3 Schools or Codecademy or something else, but the syntax of it is very different, and it's also much more rigid. Like, you really have to follow it exactly if you're using CSS. HTML actually has some flexibility and some options in some cases, but CSS really doesn't. So let me show you how to do this. I'm going to write a block of CSS, which is not real code. I'm going to write some pseudocode, and the pseudocode for a CSS block looks like this. You notice it's not actually highlighting because it knows that I'm doing it wrong, but that's okay. The selector is the thing that you want to do something about, the thing that you want to modify the appearance or layout of. And so a selector is going to be any element of this page. So it could be the H1, it could be the H2s, it could be the Ps. If I write a tag name like H2 or P here, the rule that I create will apply to every instance of that P tag as it goes down the page. And that's much better than the way we used to have to do things back in the 90s. We used to have to define each paragraph's styles, like what font we wanted it to be and what color, what size, in each paragraph tag kind of going down the page. And it was a big hassle and made really ugly looking code. But CSS came along like in the year 2000, I think, if I remember correctly. And it really changed the game. But it still took a while for people to get used to it. But now it's definitely the way to go. It's so much easier than back in my day when I was learning this stuff. So this is let's do a real one now. So this is P, and so P is going to now change any attributes that I can name and describe in CSS for all the P tags going down the page. So let's do a couple things. Let's change the color because that's a nice that makes it easy to see, basically. And the syntax for a declaration like this is always going to be the name of a property that you want to change, a colon, and then the value that you want to set it to. So as you can see, the color is black right now. Let's make it green. And I literally just typed the word green. It turned green, but that's not that's coincidental. But yeah, as you can see now, hopefully you can see my text is green. Green text on a white background, not my favorite combination, but I wanted to show you that it does indeed work. So it has changed the color for all the paragraphs. It did not change the color for the H1, which is here, or the H2s, which are here, here, and down here, and of course the image is still the same. So in my code editor, the word green turned green, but that was just a coincidence. That's just the color syntax scheme for whatever the value is. So it just was recognizing that, yes, that is a valid option. You can write any other color word you can think of usually. Let's try pink. This should probably look terrible. Let's see. Yeah, it looks pretty bad. So let's try, there's a lot of options actually. Sometimes you can do, yeah, sometimes if it's a two-word keyword, it's usually the second one is capitalized, so light green, and then the green is capitalized. So yeah, that's also pretty bad. But that's, this is the point. This is CSS. I'm going to make this something a little bit different. I'm going to use a different way of specifying a color, and that's going to be a hex code. You might remember when I introduced, when I was walking through how to use Timeline.js, I briefly mentioned hex codes because you can change the background color of a slide in Timeline.js by specifying a hex code for a color that you want it to be. Some people can do hex codes in their heads. I really can't, but a few things are easy to remember, which is anything that is like a shade of black or white, so any black, white, or gray, will all be the same value across all 6 digits. So that's kind of easy to remember. So 0000000 would be black, FFF would be white. And so anything between those two is going to be some shade of white, or some shade of gray. So 3 like this, 333 is a nice dark gray that I think looks a little better than full black for text. And I think I'm going to go even a little bit lighter on the headings. So let's do H1 and H2, and I'm putting a comma in the selector here so I can apply these properties to both at the same time. And I think I'll make these 555, 555. So these will be a slightly less dark gray. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Now I don't like this font. This is Times New Roman, so I'm going to try to change this font. I'm going to change it, first of all, for the entire web page, and then I'll change it individually for the different parts of the web page. So the body is the tag that contains everything visible, right? So it's on line 22 here. Everything else is inside of that body because it opens on line 22 and it closes on line 40, right? So all of that is a child of body, is how we would say that. And CSS is a language where most things inherit. So most of the time, any element will kind of check what its parent's properties are and use those if it doesn't have anything else telling it to do otherwise. So if I set something to the body that inherits, like the color, then it would trickle down to all the other ones. Except that in this case, these have their own color information, so they're going to overrule the body one if I did that. But let's change the font. So let's change the font to something else. And the way you do a font on the web is, or in CSS, is that you define a font family, which is you're going to give the web browser a choice of fonts to choose from. You're going to give it a first choice, second choice, third choice, because a font is actually software. You don't think of it that way probably, but a font like Times New Roman or Arial or Helvetica is actually a bit of software that lives on the computer that you're looking at right now. And even on the web page, like this Times New Roman software that's loading this font is not built into my web page or my web server. It's actually on my physical computer. So okay, we'll try Comic Sans. We'll see how that looks. But yeah, you have to name. You have to give the choice of give it a choice of fonts that it has access to, and you have to. There's a pretty small number of fonts that you can reliably count on almost everybody to have, and that includes Times New Roman, Arial, Verdana, Georgia. And I think Comic Sans, although I don't remember if it shows up on Macs, but we'll try it. So for that we can do and the other thing you can do is instead of naming a font, you can also give it just a font category, and usually computers are configured with an option for that category. So Comic Sans is usually in the cursive category. So I'm going to give it that as the fallback. There's really not anything else like Comic Sans. So I'm going to give it this, I'll just give it this one choice, but I'll show you, I'm not going to leave it on Comic Sans because you'll see why that's not a good choice for this sort of thing usually. But yeah, there it goes. Investigating color patterns in Loki, introduction, blah, blah, blah. I think Comic Sans actually gets a bad rap. I think Comic Sans works relatively well actually for paragraph text like this. If it's mixed case and if it's a light enough font weight, but it is not good, I don't think, for headings like this because the individual weights and orientations of the letters are kind of all over the place, and so it's a really messy looking font in my opinion for that kind of thing. But for things that are meant to mimic handwriting, I think it looks pretty decent. So, you know, if you want to choose Comic Sans, that's your choice, and I'm not going to tell you what to do. I see what you did there, Captain. He's in the comics, aka Comic Sans is perfect. Yes. Although I will say, if you ever get to the point where you are doing comic lettering, like lettering speech bubbles, Comic Sans is actually really bad for that. So really don't use it for that. I don't think it was actually designed for that. I think it was just designed to look like funny writing, and so that's why it's got a bad reputation. But if you do want to do comic lettering, there are much better fonts you can get. There's a company called Blambot which makes some really nice dialogue fonts. So use them. Don't use Comic Sans. I always and I teach a graphic novel class where students make comics, and I always tell them don't use Comic Sans, and a lot of them end up doing it anyway because people don't listen to me sometimes. But it's all right. So let's just change this for now. I mean, you can, if you want this Comic Sans, you can, but I'm going to change it. So actually, you know what? Maybe I will leave it that way because I want to change it in a different way. Right. So the H1 and the H2, we already have them as the color 555, 555. Let's make them have a different font than their parent. So their parent body has Comic Sans, but I'm going to give them new instructions that will override that. HTML is, so Caps is asking, is it prevalent in modern tech? HTML is fundamental to modern technology. So yeah, I mean, yeah, it's something like, I mean, the thing I'm doing right now is the kind of thing that a front-end designer would probably do or something like that, but every time you have used or interacted with a website or an app on your phone, you have been interacting with HTML. In some way. And so yes, you need to know this. Even if you never end up writing HTML by hand, like I'm doing right now, like in your professional life, knowing that it's there and then knowing how to manipulate it and understand it whenever it breaks is a really useful thing to do. So, I mean, I do it all the time. So it's something, and I mean, I'm not a professional web designer. It just is useful for me to do in my daily life frequently. So yeah, it is absolutely fundamental. It's not like it's popular as a throwback kind of thing. Like it's literally, this is HTML, this is HTML, this is HTML, this is HTML. Like it's all HTML. Like that's what it is. Yeah, so very important. All right, so let's go. Also, I think it's fun. I really like writing it. So let's do. Let's make this a better set of fonts. We'll do Arial. Well, we'll do Helvetica, even though I don't have Helvetica on this computer. We'll do Arial next, and then we'll just say pick whatever sans serif font you feel like. So this is an order of priority. So it's going to look for Helvetica first, but it's not going to find it because I don't have that on my computer. Then it's going to go to Arial, which I do have, and then it'll go to sans serif if for some reason you're looking at this and you don't have either Helvetica or Arial on your computer. And there we go. So now this has changed to Arial, and these are still Comic Sans because they don't know any different. They're just inheriting the instructions from their parent, which is the body. All right, so now this page looks kind of okay. Let me just make this a little bigger so you can see it in the full layout. There's some issues that we probably want to fix with this. Does this? No, it doesn't expand on that view of it. Let me just slide this over here temporarily. So this is what my web page looks like right now, and there's a few things I don't like about it. One thing, the image is gigantic. The other thing I don't like is that the text just flows from the full left to the full right, and so it's just a lot. I really would like to get control of the layout of this page, and make that a narrower column, and also kind of make sure that that image isn't going crazy. So I'm gonna let me put this back to the original size and slide it back over here. So I'm going to introduce something that I don't usually do when I'm giving these kinds of walkthroughs, but I found it really useful recently, and that is working with the CSS framework. And if you do end up doing front-end web design, this is how it's done these days, is you work with a framework. And a framework is basically just a kit, basically, of CSS, HTML, and JavaScript kind of already put together, and it lets you do your own work on top of it much more quickly than kind of writing a whole bunch of stuff by hand. You still have to understand CSS and HTML to work with a framework, and then you also have to learn the rules of whichever framework you're using, because they will have independent and idiosyncratic rules. But once you use them, you can make something that looks pretty good much more quickly than just doing the whole thing by hand. So I'm still going to be working by hand, but with a bit of a difference. So I'm interested in, and I like using a framework called Spectre, and it's there are many frameworks out there. Bootstrap is probably the most popular still. W3 Schools makes one too called W3.css. Bootstrap, I don't think they separated, but they were originally created by Twitter. I think Facebook has one. So there's lots and lots of frameworks. I like Spectre because it's lightweight and fairly minimalist in how it looks, but it uses like cutting edge kind of ways of doing a web page, like using Flexbox layouts, which you don't even need to know what that is because it handles it for you. So to work with CSS like this is CSS that is already written by someone else. Excuse me. So you have to import it into your page right here. So kind of the long way to do it might be to like actually view the file, which, let's see, you can't even really view the file without extracting it, and then sort of copy and paste that CSS code into a block like this. But that would like totally dominate your source code, and it would be very hard to see your actual content that you're trying to work on. Instead, you could do it a couple of ways. You can upload it to your server and host it like you did with this image, and that's probably the best way to do it, so maybe I should do it that way. But the quickest way is to link it from a CDN like this, which is a quicker way to do it. CDN is a content delivery network, and basically you can just copy and paste this into your HTML and then it'll start working. I'm going to do that now, actually, just because I'm going to get to show you how to use it, but really the better way to do it would be what it says here, installing it manually. But I'll copy this code here. These are link tags. Link tags can be a little confusing to some people because you think of a link as the thing you click on, but this is not that kind of link. This is relating two documents together at a meta level. All right, so let me paste those in here, and then I saw Chosen Clown's question, so let me see if I can get to that real quick. So Chosen Clown, you're asking what is the best way to show your project with HTML? Well, it depends on what your project ends up being. So if you are going to work with Kumu, which I think a lot of people do, you can embed a Kumu map. So if you go to Kumu and I don't know, I don't remember. I guess I can just log in to Kumu. So here's a Kumu map I was working on a while ago, and it is possible to embed it. Let me see. So yeah, down at the bottom, I don't know if you can see, but down at the bottom there's like a share looking icon. It's like the dot that then branches into two dots. If you click on that, you'll get a link to it. But you can also get this like where it says create an embed/share link, and if you click on that, it gives you this embed code. And this embed code, it's the same kind of thing that you get from like YouTube if you embed a YouTube video. So if you notice, it is HTML, so it's iframe source equals blah blah blah. And this would also be how you would have to embed it in WordPress too, by the way. So so again, going back to Captain's question, that's the application of HTML, even if you're working with a content management system. So that's that, and then I guess I'll just embed it, see what it looks like. I'll put it down here at the bottom. Control V. So an iframe is a kind of tag like the others that we talked about. It is kind of similar to an image tag because it has a source attribute, but basically an iframe is saying like this is going to be a window to another web page, and I'm going to put that web page in this little window inside of my page. That's all it's doing. So let's save that and reload it, see if it shows up. So I got a bad gateway. Yeah, I think something's going on. I saw an error pop up when I first logged into this. Maybe I have to publish it or something. But that 502 bad gateway, that's coming from Kumu. A code like that is a server-side code. It's not a client-side, so it's not something I did wrong necessarily. But it's something on the... Yeah, you see how it pops up for a second saying could not be loaded, contact support, but then it does load, so I'm a little confused by that. But that's probably what's going on with that gateway issue. So I don't know. I mean, the other way you could do it, and this is kind of clunky, but you can take a screenshot of it, but that's not as good because like the nice thing about Kumu is like you can interact with it, right? So you can see different things. This was kind of this is a work in progress. This is not meant to be seen yet. So that's why they don't make sense. But yeah, I don't know why the embed's not working, but that's what you would do. I mean, that's the way to embed it. Cool. Well, let's get into, yeah, it's 209, but I think I can at least introduce Spectre and see what it does. I'm going to remove this iframe because something's going on Kumu's side. So, okay. We've got Spectre here. Great. Now, Spectre is well documented. You can see it here. Documentation is really what you always want to look for whenever you're working with something new, and Spectre is something new. So we need to look at how they expect us to do things. So, cool. Okay, so they've created some special rules and special CSS stuff going on that we can use if we reference it the right way within our code. And it's giving us these examples right here. So these are elements that we can use, and it shows us how these are going to be rendered by Spectre when we do this. So this looks pretty nice so far. I'm going to take these font things off because I want to see what Spectre does with the fonts and the colors, because I think it will actually make a pretty nice look for my page anyway without doing anything. So in fact, let me just delete all that because I don't need that anymore if I have Spectre. Yeah, okay, so already Spectre has changed the font. It went with a sans serif font. Probably Arial. I can't... No, it's not Arial. What is that? I don't know, but it doesn't really matter because it looks okay. So no, actually it doesn't matter. And if you do want to know these things, if you're using a web browser like Chrome or Firefox, which you should be, you should not be using Safari or Edge to do this kind of work, but, well, I'm kind of overstating it. You can use those if you really want to. It is often helpful to inspect the web page not by looking at like what you wrote, but actually looking at what got rendered. Sometimes there is a difference, and a way to understand that difference or inspect it is using the web developer tools built into your web browser. So I don't think, yeah, OBS isn't capturing the pop-up, but you go to settings, or no, you click the three dots menu at the top right, then you go to more tools and then developer tools, and then that opens up the developer tool thingy, which I need to reattach to my browser. So it's this little thing that pops up in the bottom. You can also break it out as a separate window, which is what I usually do. But you can use this to see your web page in terms of how the browser sees it. And what you see here should be familiar. Like, it's all the code that I wrote, right, the HTML stuff. But you can also see what's happening to make it look the way it looks. And in this case, because a lot of that's coming from Spectre, this is helpful for me to see what Spectre is doing. So Spectre here has said that this is actually, the font family is actually Apple System, System UI, Blink Mac System Font, Sego UI, Roboto, Helvetica Neue, or sans serif. So it's a much more complex font family set up there, but that's why it looks the way it does. Right, okay, so pretty good stuff. Let's see if I can, yeah, otherwise, yeah, it hasn't done anything to the width yet, but that's because I haven't done anything else with the layout. Let's see what else Spectre gives us. So headings, sure, paragraphs, sure. Oh, neat. So it does give you little nice little inline things like that. That's pretty good. So what this is saying here is, like, if you wanted to make something like look like it was typed on a keyboard, you can put it in a keyboard, a KBD tag, Or if you want to make some code, like I often do want to talk about code when I'm writing HTML, let me make some code right here. It's saying that I should use a code element, and then it's going to make it look a certain way. I do kind of like that. So where's my page? There it is. Yeah, so there you go. So you can see that all I had to do was write code. I made that, gave it a code tag, and now it's got like a pinkish background, and it's a red color, and it's in a monospace font, probably Courier, and that's all good. Like if I wanted to do that myself, I would have to write a selector like that. Like code should have, color and a font family. I'd have to write, several lines of code to do that. But Spectre's handling it for me, so thanks, Spectre. All right, so so that stuff's kind of neat, but the most helpful thing that I think a framework provides is layout stuff, because that's usually the next step. Once you kind of figure out how to make things look a little different with the colors, then it is often really useful to, you start thinking about how to lay it out and design the web page as a whole. So I'm going to do that next. And that'll probably be all I have time for today. If you have questions about a specific thing you want to try in your HTML, then let me know, and I can try to show it today as well. But I might also want to talk about it tomorrow. I don't know what else you want to try, but let me, if you have questions as they come up, of course, please ask. So let's take a look at the layout stuff, and we're going to use this grid layout system. I find the grid layout system pretty intuitive, so that's what I'm going to use. And this is a way to put content in different places on the web page, plain and simple. And you can see different scenarios, and then you see the code for it down here to create those different scenarios. But the basic idea is that you've got a container, and then you've got columns within that container, and each of those columns is a width that's indicated by the number that you assign it to. And so col-6 would be a column that takes up half of the screen. And the thing you have to remember is that this is a 12 grid, so it's a grid where it assumes that something that takes up the full width of the screen would be a 12 wide column. Something that's 6 would be half of that. Something that's 4 would be a third of that, and so on. So it lets you predict how many columns total you'll have whenever you lay it out. It's up to 12, and then it's whatever divisions of 12 you specify for your columns. So at this point, what's really useful for me, what I usually do is actually kind of sketch out the layout that I want to do, like on paper. So let me grab some paper and show you that real quick. So I kind of like just being able to see it, as I'm doing it. And I do actually want to lay out this page because I've got a lot of images I want to put here from my Loki stuff. So let me just try something real quick. So. So here's, this is a mess, but I'm going to actually do it like this so that I can, and I'll probably put another paragraph there. Anyway, this is what I worked on, and it's not, you can't really learn from much from that, but I needed to do that for myself so I would know what I'm doing. I'm going to do a big title, a subtitle, a paragraph to the left, an image to the right of that paragraph. Then I'm going to do 6 columns, 1 column for each episode, and then within each of those columns, I'm going to break down specific information. Although I probably shouldn't use grid columns for that. I'm probably going to use a table because I want to make horizontal comparisons. And so and what I'm going to do for each of those is have each of the images and visualizations I created, there'll be a small version, like a thumbnail size version, so you can see them all side by side at a glance, but when you click on it, you can see it full version. All right, that's my main idea. And then I'll have analysis and stuff down at the bottom and some sources. Okay, good. So that's what I needed to do. So let's do the first thing where I'm going to try to put an image on the, I'll put some text and then an image next to it. All right, so let's take a look at what it does to do. And I'll do this kind of, this will be fine. So I'll do, I'm not going to write real code, real text here. This is still going to be lorem ipsum. So I'm copying some code here, and this is using a lot of div tags with special class attributes assigned to them. And these attributes are the class attribute is a way of indicating a particular kind of thing on in your code, and it's something that you can use in CSS. Spectre is using them within its CSS to apply the grid rendering. So let me see. It's so their actual CSS is going to be very complicated, but what we have to write is going to turn out to be really simple. So let's do. I'm going to do everything in one big container. I think that makes the most sense. So I'm going to do that first one here at the beginning of my document. So that's right after body opens, and then before anything else, I'm going to open this container. So it's div class equals container, and I need to close it at the end down here. You can see, by the way, my code editor is giving me this little X, these little things saying, hey, there's something wrong. It's because I haven't closed that div tag. But when I close it, it should be happy now. Okay, so that div called, the div with the class container, that contains everything and probably did not make any difference yet, but, oh no, it did. It added a little bit of padding, so that's already a little bit better. But we can do this better. You know what I just thought of? I'm gonna do another layer because I want to actually move this content into a more centralized kind of, you know, layout. Come to think of it. So yeah, I'm gonna do it that way. Sorry, I'm kind of thinking out loud as I go here. So using Spectre, what I want to do is I want to have a 6 wide column in the middle. So there would be a blank, like 3 here, 6, and then 3 on the other side. That's what I'm going to try to do. Let's see. So I'm not sure what the best way to do this is, but like, I wonder. Oh yeah, we can do offset. So that'd be easy. Good. So let's do another one. We have to do for some reason you have to do this separately. You have to have a class equals container and then a class equals columns, and you can't do them both as one tag for some reason. I don't know why. At least I don't think you can. I'm not going to do it now, but to me, I wish I could combine those together. Okay, so now I've got 2 tags that contain everything. One has class equals container, one has class equals columns, and then I'm going to actually do my column, my single column here for this layer. So we'll call it div class equals. We're going to do call for equals column call dash 4. And how do we do offset here? They do offset a little bit differently. Oh, okay. So maybe it's just MX auto. I'm just reading the documentation. See how that looks. Hey, all right, that looks better. Well, not really, but it does kind of look better. It does not look better. But it would if I made this an actually normally width web page. Let me show you what that would look like if I expand my my window. Yeah, that's way too narrow. Did I type this? Did I type that right? Maybe I typed. Did I type? Oh, I typed 4 instead of 6. Let me do 6. Okay, that's better, but I think actually 8 would look even better. Let's do 8, or let's do 7. Can we do 7? Wasn't sure if an odd number would work, but that looks too narrow still. You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna go with 8. So that's still pretty wide, but it gives you a nice cushion left and right, and that's, you know, that's gonna work. Okay, so but what doesn't work though is like when you go narrow, right? So because it's still gonna, you know, it's gonna be squishy. If you were to view this on your phone, then it might not look right. Let me see. You know, Chrome actually has a phone simulator built into it, so you can actually use Chrome to preview what it would look like on a phone if you want, if that's what you're doing. But I'm not going to bother with that just yet because I want to get control of that image. I think I'll just do that and then probably wrap things up. Okay, so let's see. Okay, good. Yeah, I wasn't sure how they did this, but yes, you can also make it a responsive layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say it's, you know what, I'll make it go back to 7, but that's only going to be applied whenever the window is wide. And this is called a responsive layout because it basically responds. It's like, okay, well, what is the width of this particular window, and it will adapt itself appropriately. So this is, I'll say call is going to be 8 columns wide whenever it's the window is large, but when it's small, I want this to be 12 wide. I think that'll work. Let's find out. Oh yeah, it worked. Good. So this is now small because it's narrow, right? If I expand this, this should snap back to 8. Yeah, there it goes. So, well, it got weird there for a second. I don't know why it's jumping like that, but why is it? For some reason, it thinks that's small right there, that width. Maybe that has to do with the aspect ratio. Anyway, that's a much more comfortable layout at that size. If I go narrower, it snaps into something more comfortable for that size. Right, so that's what's called responsive design. And I missed that there somehow. So that's pretty good. All right, I like it. Now I'd like to get control of this image because this image is too wide. This image is taking up a lot of room. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to make it, I'm just going to do this and then wrap it up because it's almost 2:30. I've been going down for a long time. Hi. Hi guys. I'm still teaching right now, so.
Julie, there can only be one list.
Okay.
Julie, there can only be one list.
Cecily, it's okay to have another list. Yeah. Best friends and they argue all the time. Okay, so this is the last thing I'm going to show you, which is just to get control of this image. Remember how I said like I couldn't quite figure out the math to get the right width for the height and keep it the same aspect ratio. You don't have to, right? You can actually just say I want it to be a certain percentage, and it'll figure out the right ratio to do it. So there might be something in Spectre that can do this for me. Let me take a look real quick. But if not, it's easy enough to do in. And oh, neat. Okay, so image, they do have something already in here, which is I can add this image responsive tag, or image responsive class rather to the image tag. So that's nice. Let me do that. Let's see how that goes. That should probably actually handle my image pretty well. So this is another class attribute. In this case, it's img-responsive, and what they think they're saying is that it's going to try to adapt itself to the container. Oh, it did. Beautiful. Nice. So you can see now that it is basically 100% wide, but that's good because before it was like 300% wide, like 300% of the screen width. Now it's like 100%, which is good. And it'll probably, it moves with the with everything else. Like it responds to the window so that relative to the document and what I'm viewing, it stays in about the same position, which is really what you want. Yeah. Cool. So that was easier than I thought. Great. Now, okay, so I went pretty far today. Like getting into Spectre is pretty cool, but I think as you can see, it does take a bit of, it takes some work and it's a little different. And really your guide in this case is going to be looking at the documentation for Spectre if you decide you want to work with Spectre. If you want to use some other framework, you're certainly welcome to. Bootstrap is good. If they have their own thing, getbootstrap.com kind of explains how to do it, and it just will give you different styles, different options, they do a similar grid system to what I just showed you, so they just use a slightly different terminology, so you have to use their terminology, use their class names basically, but it works fine if you kind of read it. W3 Schools does have one, I think anyway. Let me see. I need to make this browser bigger so I can actually see what I'm doing. The tutorials. Where is their thing? Yeah, well, w3.css. That's what I was looking for. But yeah, this is their framework, and they probably use it to create this web page. So when you see it, as it is, it probably works this way. It just again, it's different names of classes that do different, do the thing that you're trying to do. So you just have to kind of look it up and see what you're trying to do. You have to understand the terminology, right? I mean, that's the big issue with working with the framework is if you don't know the vocabulary for it, or kind of even the landscape of your web page, it can be hard to kind of read the documentation and understand. But I'm happy to help you with this. Like, this is something I really enjoy doing. So just let me know, and I'm happy to show you what to do, or even give you some code that'll work if you have a particular scenario you're trying to accomplish within your website, your web page. So yeah, very similar. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna wrap it up. I think I've been going long enough, but I covered a lot today. I hope you were able to follow that, or that it was helpful. I continue to be available to help with these things throughout today and tomorrow. But then on Friday, I'm going camping. So I will be off in the woods and probably won't have cell service until Sunday evening. So you will be kind of on your own then, but I will be back. And if you still are working on this even through the weekend or into early next week, that's still okay. I'm always, don't mind if things come in late. I'm happy to help. So the other thing I wanted to mention is I've published the final assignment description on Canvas. So that's the mediated metacognitive meditation. Since I'm wrapping up the stream for today, I'm not going to spend any time really talking about it today, but you might want to take a look at it if you're kind of curious about where we're headed with this class and with what is left. Okay, well, I think that's good enough for now. I'm going to wrap it up. I will be streaming again tomorrow. I will continue to show you things about your web page, or answer any questions or solve problems related to the methodology stuff you're working on. So send me your questions and I'll try to answer them, on the stream if I can. Because if you have a question, you're probably not the only one with that question. So that's a good thing to ask. Please ask those questions. All right. So yeah, thanks you two, Chosen Clown. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all later. Oh yeah. Sorry, I keep thinking of things to tell you. I am going to be continuing to release grading videos. I did several yesterday, and I'm going to keep doing those through today. Those are uploaded as comments on your weekly reflections. So take a look at that assignment. Like hopefully you have it set so you get notifications from Canvas. But if you don't, then you can look in the comments on the assignment page for your submission for the weekly reflection thing. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Please watch those videos. I try to make them helpful and informative as I respond to your work. So. Cool. Oh, what is this? Oh, neat. Oh, okay. I just found this little game here. All right. Great. Well, that has nothing to do with what I was talking about. I just saw it and clicked on it. All right. Well, I will say goodbye to you all, and I will see you later. Have a good day.